I bet most people could probably guess who that is just from the sound alone. He's the iconic action star that popularized Kung Fu in the West, who broke down racial barriers in Hollywood, and who's viewed as one of the earliest pioneers of mixed martial arts. I'm of course talking about the one and only Bruce Lee. Despite passing away at only 32, he left an enduring mark on the world and is celebrated for his martial arts prowess, his passionate pursuits in philosophy and filmmaking, his charismatic swagger, and how he whooped Chuck Norris's ass on celluloid. It's not an exaggeration to say that he is one of the most influential Asian figures in recent history. Hi, I'm Dave, and I talk too much. You've been warned. And today, I'm going to be talking about how Bruce Lee is portrayed in these 4 very different films released over the last 3 decades. With Asian actors, storytellers, and artists of all kinds breaking barriers and achieving unprecedented success in mainstream entertainment as of late, I think it's a good time to look back at Bruce Lee and appreciate how he fought his way to becoming the world's first international action superstar. By analysing how each of these filmmakers from different countries and different eras chose to creatively depict Bruce Lee, we'll come to see how some of their decisions are emblematic of Hollywood's past and present issues with Asian representation. And by the end of this video, we're going to find out if any of these films did the man justice, and which of these Bruce Lees was best. Okay, let's start with the oldest film first. Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, is a 1993 US production directed by Rob Cohen. Of the 4 films, this one covers the broadest time period of Lee's life, beginning with a young Bruce in Hong Kong, all the way to just shy of his death in 1973. It's a pretty conventional biopic that loosely recounts Bruce's humble beginnings and rise to fame, with a ton of creative license. In the lead role, we've got the charismatic and likable Jason Scott Lee.
Hi, Mom.
And he does a great job of infusing the role with warmth and energy. Imitating Bruce seems to come quite naturally to him.
Be like water. Water's the softest stuff in the world, but it can fit into any container. It seems weak, but it can penetrate rock. Be like the nature of water.
With no martial arts background, he was quickly trained up and got himself into pretty damn good shape to execute some of the action scenes, and more importantly, the shirtless scenes, of which there are many. Jokes aside, I think this is something the film should be commended for, the fact that it depicts an Asian male lead as sexually desirable. Asian men are frequently desexualized in mainstream Western media, and the pervasive stereotype paints us as passive, emasculated boys lacking sex appeal and a voice, as photographer Andrew Kung puts it.
All this for a Chinese guy. I can't believe you're going out with a Chinese guy.
It's frustrating how often Asian men are marginalized characters, existing on the fringe of white stories. We're painted as meek and sexless, expendable for shock value, token members of ensemble casts, or, at worst, just used for stupid, cheap laughs.
I'm with you! I'm with you! You gonna fuck on me? Nobody's gonna fuck on you! We're on your side! I hate Godzilla! I hate him too!
We're less threatening if we're reduced to jokes and castrated. And in essence, that's what originally fueled the emasculated stereotype. Matthew Salesses explains that it can be traced back to white insecurities over the male Chinese labor force during and after the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad in the late 19th century. Leading up to the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese immigration completely, much of the propaganda depicted Chinese men as out to rape and pillage, specifically to rape white women and pillage white men's jobs. White masculinity depended on the sexual and economic possession of white women. By 1907, white masculinity's fear of its own emasculation produced anti-miscegenation laws that promised to revoke citizenship from any white woman who married an Asian American. If the hypersexualization of Asian American males was an expression of white male insecurity, their desexualization was an attempt to ease that insecurity. The film's central romance between Bruce and his American love interest Linda, therefore, was a rare thing to see on screen. Even by today's standards, an interracial romance like this still proves to be quite uncommon. While I view it as a net positive of the movie, I'm also aware that it comes with some complex baggage that calls into question why many stories about Asian American masculinity rely on sex with a white woman. Scholars like Elaine Kim have also noted it as being a frequent and problematic trope in Asian American literature. That being said, the love story is probably the film's strongest element. It's the film's heart, and despite it sometimes being melodramatic and cheesy, I think there's a simple earnestness to it all.
This is your idea?
My idea. To move into an industrial slum.
This is no slum. This is the first Bruce Lee Kung Fu Institute. You talked me into it. You make me feel like I can do anything.
Thanks to Jason and Lauren Holly's on-screen chemistry, it's enjoyable to watch their relationship grow and develop on screen. We see the ups and downs. We see them dating and falling in love. We see them arguing and hiding things from one another. And we see them happy and content. To me, one of the more impactful scenes between them is earlier in their dating phase, when they go to the cinemas to watch Breakfast at Tiffany's. When the racist Asian caricature appears bumbling around like a fool, played by a white actor in yellowface, the audience erupts in laughter. Even Linda is cracking up. But the camera pans across to reveal an uncomfortable Bruce, quietly enduring the moment of insult and hurt. As an Asian guy myself who's exhausted with seeing Asian characters used as punchlines in entertainment, Asian roles being whitewashed, actors donning fucking yellowface, and Asian actors being bombarded with toxic racist hate, it's a nice cathartic change of pace to see this addressed in a movie scene. It clearly conveys how poor representation and racist stereotyping is dehumanizing and hurtful. Sure, the scene is heavy-handed, but it's quietly effective all the same. We start on a single close-up of Linda amused. The camera pans to Bruce showing him miserable. We return to Linda to see her processing this, and then we shift to a two-person medium shot now that they're on the same page, both wanting to leave the cinema.
Let's get out of here.
On the surface level, it seems to communicate a pretty obvious truth. Racism is bad. But in Scholar of Cultural Studies Megan Morris's interesting analysis, she reads the scene as
an affirmation of the diverse collective nature of film experience, and that cinematic negotiation involves you, the film, and other people.
The way Linda has that jaw-dropping jolt of astonishment at how the world shifts when you see, or believe that you can see, what someone else is seeing, illustrates to us how cinema can teach us to empathize with people from different lived experiences from our own. Or in Morris's words,
that fantasy can impel us towards others as well deeper into ourselves.
And unfortunately, it seems like a lesson in empathy is desperately needed right now for the many ignorant racist assholes out there spreading hate and harm. Because of idiotic fuckwits like Trump spouting his racist and xenophobic bullshit, harassment and discrimination towards Asian Americans have escalated to alarming levels during the COVID pandemic.
Where police data shows there's been a 1,900% increase in hate crimes against Asians.
We want to warn you that the images are disturbing. And he shared these photos of his 71-year-old mother.
Joe's gonna fuck you. You fucking Asian piece of shit.
Oh my! A North Sacramento teacher pulling at her eyes during a live Zoom class to describe Asian people.
The attack happened just around 10 this morning on...
He kicked me and dragged me across the pavements. And...
Now, Chang was attacked Monday afternoon on Market Street near 2nd during his lunch break.
Young woman wearing a mask is attacked in a subway station.
Police are investigating another attack on an Asian American person.
Suspect viciously attacked him, killing the man.
I'm sorry for that heavy pivot, but I didn't want to undermine the severity of the situation. Innocent people are being harassed, attacked, and murdered in this disgusting surge in hate crime. And so the Stop Asian Hate movement has risen to spread awareness and to demand change. By channeling my frustrations into this little conversation, I hope I'm putting something out into the world that's constructive, educational, and positive for the movement, even if admittedly it's just a little YouTube video critiquing racist media representation. Okay, let's ease back into talking about the films. No more confronting news footage, I promise. Looking at Dragon, you wouldn't expect the film to really offer anything particularly progressive by today's standards. I mean, I wouldn't blame you. It was written and produced by members of white Hollywood almost 30 years ago. But to my surprise, the filmmakers made a decent effort to depict the varied kinds of racism experienced by Asian people. Much of this is simplified and sugar-coated for mass consumption, but hey, I still appreciated their attempts.
Back down, just another gook. Just another wetback Charlie Chan, slow-pay, coolie dishwasher in a sticky restaurant.
Early in the film, we see a few drunk white sailors harassing an Asian woman, calling to mind the misogynistic yellow fever fetishizing of Asian women as being submissive and exotic sex objects.
This one's fine, get one of your own.
We get this little exchange between a history teacher and Bruce while they're making their way over to the States via boat. He cautions Bruce to be wary of the American dream.
Sky's the limit, that's what they say.
Not a Chinaman's chance. They say that too. You ever hear that?
No, we're not human to them.
Side note, this actor's actually Japanese, not Chinese. But I guess all Asians look alike. Hey, Hollywood. We get a racist college jock starting a fight with Bruce, who lumps Koreans and Chinese as interchangeable.
See, that's what I mean. Your kind don't understand English.
My kind?
Yeah, gooks, chinks, your kind. You guys killed my dad and Korea. You think I'm happy to see you, my Jen?
We see Bruce being indirectly denied service at a restaurant.
Lee, the reservations at 8 o'clock.
I'm sorry, I don't have a table right now.
It's been half an hour and I still see people in seat ahead of us.
Come, don't exaggerate. It's been barely 20 minutes.
We see Linda's mother's prejudice.
Do you really want to have yellow babies? Can you imagine that? Yellow babies?
Yes, I can.
Oh.
And of course, we overhear a studio exec's anxious thoughts on Bruce's casting.
Listen, there's one small problem.
Yeah, what is it?
It's this guy Lee. You know, he's awfully oriental. Can you just make sure he keeps the mask on?
The uphill battle faced by Bruce living in the US, be it personal or professional, is constantly illustrated to us, and it makes him quite a sympathetic underdog. And this is absolutely by design. Bruce's flattering and sanitized portrayal is likely due to it being based on Linda Lee Cadwell's book, Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew, and perhaps in adherence to the usual studio mandates of making sure your protagonist is likable. Like it or not, Bruce is a brand, a commodity whose image is to be protected. Therefore, Bruce's real-life flaws are never explored in the film. His short temper, his obsession with his career and fame, his flashy materialism and overspending, his antiquated ideas on gender roles, and his alleged womanizing are never on display. He's never explicitly critiqued or given faults because the filmmakers were making a hagiography and so embellished facts to favor Bruce's image. For example, Bruce was a straight-up delinquent as a kid. He did poorly at school, pulled out a knife on a teacher once, got expelled from high school, and frequently got himself into street fights. But in the film, as soon as we meet him, he's there to bravely save a damsel in distress. He doesn't throw the first punch, and he isn't the one who escalates things by pulling out a knife. His dad sends him off to America because the sailor's uncle is a high-ranking cop who'll probably throw Bruce into jail. But in real life, Bruce's parents were just tired of his mischief and declining grades and wanted him to get his shit together. So their solution was to basically banish him overseas to continue his studies alone as a sobering punishment. The film makes him out to be a well-meaning rebel on a journey to remake himself instead of a reckless troublemaker being exiled. Here's another good example. In real life, Bruce and Linda kept their dating a secret from their families until Linda fell pregnant and her parents discovered their plans to run off and get married. The filmmakers, however, twist the facts to keep Bruce likable and sympathetic. While Bruce has told his dad about Linda, Linda's been keeping Bruce a secret from her mum, and this leaves him sad and insecure.
Are you ashamed you want to marry a Chinaman?
No, I'm not ashamed. Did you tell your father about me? Did you tell him about your little Guadalupe girl?
Yes.
He eventually meets Linda's mum, and in this oddly calm meeting, Bruce is triggered by this comment.
You're an American citizen. You're not really an American.
Bruce!
Linda chases after him, and now they're both defiant, star-crossed lovers who'll drive off into the pouring rain and make their own way. Again, the reality was Bruce knocked her up. They were going to run away and marry in secret, but they got caught. In Linda's own words, their plan was the coward's way out. The movie definitely rewrote history to make things less cowardly and more romantic. In fact, exaggeration seems to be the film's default preference. Biopics, by their nature tend to treat their subjects with excessive reverence, and this film is no exception. Now, while Lee was never particularly interested in politics, he did teach martial arts indiscriminately to anyone who genuinely was interested. This went against the unspoken rule amongst Chinese communities to keep their martial arts techniques strictly to themselves.
You've been teaching the Guai Lo. This must stop.
I'll teach whoever wants to learn.
We do things differently here. One of the things we do not do is teach our secrets to whites, blacks. They are the enemy.
They are not the enemy. They just don't know us. They've never seen the real beauty of our culture. Let's show it to them.
The first person Bruce ever taught in the US was a black judo practitioner named Jesse Glover. Jesse was unable to find any Chinese teachers willing to instruct him, so approached Bruce for lessons. There's a fictitious character in the film named Jerome Sprout who shares obvious parallels to the real-life Jesse.
And some of them other Chinese teachers, man, they turned me down flat. Some of them wouldn't even let me in the door.
You got yourself a teacher.
I can dig it, man. You got yourself a student.
So, Bruce's openness to teach anyone regardless of race or background was a real-life admirable quality of his, but in the movie they dial it to 11. The grumpy Chinese elders issue Bruce with a formal fight that he must heroically win in order to continue teaching non-Chinese students. The screenwriters named the challenger Johnny Sun and set the fight in this hokey, secret Mortal Kombat-style chamber. Director Rob Cohen has said that he wanted to craft this biopic as if it were in fact a Bruce Lee movie. and that meant wanting the fights to have a larger sense of fun and danger, even if it came at the expense of reality not being exactly adhered to.
Thought that'd be a little more exciting.
So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and presume that they were intentionally being over the top. Just another example of them casually embellishing the truth in favor of entertainment. Like, they even threw a demon into the story. There's this foreboding Shredder-looking spirit that attacks Bruce 3 times in the movie. It's like a metaphorical monster representing Bruce's inner demons, and it actually adds an interesting mystical, spiritual element to the very linear, predictable narrative. It kinda does get silly though when his Master Ip Man, no not that one, this one with the bad old man makeup, acknowledges the demon's actual existence and warns Bruce that he's destined to fight it at his physical peak. But hey, at least it gives Bruce a dramatic final boss battle for the film's climax. Another very notable invention in the film is how Bruce injures his back. In reality, Bruce severely strained his lower back just one random day while weight training. Doctors told him he may never practice martial arts again. He was bedridden for about 6 months, but healed up and continued to train, but it was an injury that hindered him for the rest of his life. The movie's version of events, however, has Johnny's son being a sore loser and Fly kicking him in the back after losing the challenge match. Bruce is strapped into this crazy hospital contraption and loses all hope, until Linda inspires him to invent his own style of martial arts called Jeet Kune Do. He triumphantly heals up over time with some physio, and there are even a few scenes of him in a wheelchair. The filmmakers really milked this. Other issues with the film are found in its pretty standard direction. There's a lack of imagination with much of the storytelling, themes, and cinematography. Everything feels serviceable, but uninspired. There's so much clunky dialogue too. Characters often blandly speak their minds, and there's rarely any subtext or subtlety.
You want it so bad, don't you? You want that love so bad.
I want to stop breaking my wife's heart. I want to play with my children without having to look at the clock. If I lose them, nothing means anything.
It just doesn't have enough ingredients to rise above being average, but that's not to say it's a bad film. It's got a solid lead performance, and there's a clear sense of veneration for Bruce present despite all the historical inaccuracies. The action is okay, the romance is earnest, Bruce's enthusiasm and charm are on full display.
Linda, your mom's got great legs. Great legs.
There are fun callbacks to his filmography for fans, and, as a bonus, the film makes commendable efforts to depict the era's racism, and even challenges stereotypes faced by Asian men as being undesirable or the model minority. Bruce here is a sexy, outspoken rebel, a confident, charming, but vulnerable character, and it's refreshing to see. So refreshing, in fact, that Megan Morris complimented the film as being
one of the more powerful treatments of institutionalized racism in a film industry that US cinema possesses.
Film 2 is the Hong Kong production Bruce Lee, My Brother, also known as Young Bruce Lee in the UK. It was released in 2010 and was directed by Raymond Yip and Manfred Wong. Now, in terms of narrative focus, this is pretty much the opposite of the previous film. Where the American filmmakers on Dragon consulted with Linda Lee and the Bruce Lee estate, this film was produced by Robert Lee, Bruce's younger brother, and also credited his other siblings as consultants. In fact, Phoebe and Robert both appear at the front of the film, speaking to camera to emphasize the film's more personal, familial recounting of Bruce's upbringing.
This movie is about Bruce Lee's untold story, which is also our family story.
Untold story is pretty apt. In the Dragon film, there's absolutely no mention of Bruce's siblings, his mother, or his upbringing. It quickly glosses over his youth in Hong Kong to spend most of its runtime and focus on his life in America. This film instead frames its whole story on Bruce's youth, starting literally with his birth right up until age 18, moments before he's about to board that ship that'll take him to the US. The film presents us with an intimate portrayal of Bruce's family and their home life. He and his family were relatively quite well off. They lived in a spaciously comfortable Hong Kong apartment and even had servants, and a large portion of the film is set in these walls. The setting is deemed so important that the film begins with a long Steadicam shot of the space during the opening credits. The strict head of this household was Bruce's father, a film actor who started off on the stage in Chinese opera theatre. In fact, it was through his father's connections that Bruce found himself becoming a child actor, starring in several films. Again, a fascinating detail that the Dragon film completely omits. Bruce's family nicknamed him Never Sit Still because of his restless energy. He was notoriously hyperactive. This temperament would frequently get him into trouble with his concerned parents. Some of the pranks young Bruce pulled were wild. Pause this and give it a read if you want to hear about how he once basically made a shit bomb for a revenge scheme. Similar to Dragon, however, the film decides to soften Bruce's depiction so his troublemaking youth is downplayed in order to respect his image. They do show Bruce being a wild, energetic kid who easily formed and led tight cliques, but there's no depiction of Bruce walking the streets arrogantly looking for fights with his crew, no Bruce struggling and hating school, and definitely no Bruce getting expelled for severely bullying a classmate. Instead, we have actor Arif Rahman turning in a good but one-note performance. This is more of a script issue, to be fair, since this Bruce doesn't really have a character arc. There's a fair bit of plot that Bruce has put through, a love triangle, a boxing match, a cha-cha contest, a visit from corrupt police, tracking down a missing friend, but they're so loosely connected that the film lacks an overall central narrative. So Bruce just goes about each disconnected plot point with not much more to do than be a happy-go-lucky handsome face. We do get to learn fun tidbits about Bruce and his brother Robert winning a cha-cha contest together, and not being able to ride a bike in his youth, but being fed random fun facts is not a substitute for character depth. Actor Rahman gets few chances to flex any range, with only a few scenes of tepid drama to work with. The most painfully boring example being a love triangle subplot featuring bland love interests. This is another weakness of the film. The female characters are so underwritten. This is especially notable when compared to the more assertive and fleshed out Linda from Dragon. The women here are relegated to one-dimensional functions, a generic mother, a swooning admirer, and an object of desire. There's literally no character beyond this hollow smile. If you're after interesting female characters with agency and personality, you're not going to find them here. The film is also thematically thin. While Dragon explored Bruce's challenges with racism, being in an interracial relationship, butting heads with traditionalists, and even fighting a supernatural demon, this film has no notable thematic ideas. It doesn't seem to have anything to say. Instead, we get random elements that could have been better explored and expanded to serve the film. Elements like the love triangle, for example. If they had the balls, they could have depicted Bruce as a womanizing player, insensitive and oblivious to how he mistreats the women in his life. We then could have had more outspoken female characters calling him out on his bullshit and criticizing his chauvinistic behavior. His character could grow and learn as a result. Bam, he gets a little character arc and we get better female characters. It even ties nicely into the mythical origins of Wing Chun, the martial arts style Bruce first studies and becomes obsessed with in the film. Wing Chun's legend is unique because it is one of the very few styles whose founder is a woman. Having Bruce learn this in a scene could have been an interesting character moment. Another example? His father was an opium addict in real life, and it was a grueling road to breaking that addiction. But in the film, it's handled so quickly. The dad quits cold turkey, no issues. It feels so disingenuous and inaccurate to skirt the brutal realities of withdrawal. Seeing how their father's addiction and recovery affected Bruce and his family could have been interesting fuel for some family drama. The film already kinda has blatant anti-drug messaging in it. Towards the end of the film, there's a very tonally out-of-place scene about one of Bruce's friends becoming a drug addict. They track him down, are horrified to find him living in squalor as a junkie, and then there's a rooftop chase involving angry drug dealers. It all dramatically ends when Bruce's junkie friend heroically sacrifices himself. It's so over the top, and as far as I can tell, it's not based on any actual real events. Like, honestly, what a weird and jarring thing to make up for the film's climax. And on top of this, there are laughably bad editing choices here. Bruce's friend saves the day, but dies.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
And they milk it for every drop of melodrama they can, believe me. Because seconds after he dies, the movie suddenly wants to rewind to show you explicitly how the friend got to the roof and him deciding to help Bruce, with cheesy friendship flashbacks included, of course. It's so clunky, it's so dumb and out of order and unnecessary, it's just really bad editing. And here's another awful moment. Bruce is creepily stalking the love interest. She clearly enters this building, but then she somehow appears behind him. Like, how? Can she teleport? Does she have super speed? What is going on here? You know what, let's move on to discussing the film's aesthetics and style. Let's talk about the cinematography. There's an incongruency to the look of the film. It uses a mix of sharp digital camera photography, shallow depth of field, and distracting camera work, and unfortunately to me, this all clashes with the film's 1940s and 50s period setting. Sure, it's sometimes pretty, but it also sometimes looks like a glossy modern-day commercial. It's too digitally sleek and tidy. The choice to lean into desaturated sepia color tones was also unfortunate. It filters everything to look coffee-stained and is such an obvious, manufactured way to evoke the past. Despite the impressive production design and costuming, the slick and out-of-place camera work often distracted me. The film also has a superficial abundance of slow-mo shots, heavy backlighting, and lens flare. In their goal to ensure things look pleasing and polished, few creative choices really stand out with any sense of artistically motivated intent. The blocking, the camera work, the general visual storytelling seems most preoccupied with just capturing pretty images. The drama and acting are also pretty overdramatic, at least for my tastes. And the heavy-handed filmmaking plays a big part in this. Some of the performances and big acting choices are hindered by cheesy, overt editing and overpowering music. Oh my god, and the white actors they hired are so bad. Like, here, just watch.
Charlie, it's not whether you win or lose. It's what have you learned from this experience.
Bruce Lee is so fast. I want to fight him again.
Well, Charlie, I'm glad to hear you're very confident. What is your plan?
Now let's talk action. There's too little of it, and it's all unevenly backloaded in the film in the last half hour. When the first fight looks like it's about to go down almost 40 minutes in, we get blueballed with this fake-out freeze frame. It's a fun homage to the end of Fist of Fury, but man, a Bruce Lee movie that's light on action is basically criminal. When the first fight does actually happen, it's so jarring when the action music kicks in. By this point, we're well past the 1 hour mark, and it only lasts 30 seconds. Bruce gets distracted, and then punched right in the head. We had to wait an hour for that? Shortly after that disappointing fight, Wing Chun is finally introduced, but for what is essentially the catalyst that would change Bruce forever, so little screen time and emphasis is placed on him beginning those classes. It's baffling. We get a brief scene of Bruce joining Ip Man's school and one brief training montage. I don't think this properly reflects how formative the training was for Bruce. I'm okay with the film wanting to focus more on Bruce's personal life, but because it does so in pretty mediocre fashion, the lack of martial arts is really felt, especially with the film's terrible pacing. Speaking of poor pacing, here's the film's first real fight scene, 90 minutes in. It's a big bloated boxing match that seems to be a huge exaggeration of that one time back in high school when Bruce competed in an inter-school boxing championship. There's no dramatic tension in the fight. Bruce holds his own for most of the match, only slipping once because of water spilt by his friend, which is played off as a joke. There's no real point where we think he might not win. It's over-edited, erratically filmed, and has no flow or shape to the choreography. It's just a noisy, incoherent mess. Again, we waited 90 minutes for this. According to author Matthew Polly's research, after the real boxing match, Bruce realized a weakness in his Wing Chun technique. Wing Chun's short, quick, rapid straight punches were designed for bare-knuckle alley brawls. The thick padding and boxing gloves made them mostly harmless in the ring. This was maybe one of the earliest instances of Bruce noticing the limitations of only being versed in one rigid combat system. This realization would seed his eventual philosophy to cross-train in different disciplines in order to be an adaptable, versatile fighter, or, as he famously phrased it, using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. But nah, that's too introspective. Let's just give the audience a big triumphant win, with Bruce just straight up punching the guy in the face over and over until the fight ends. Then less than 5 minutes later, we get their private rematch. We haven't even had time to digest the previous boxing match yet. This is, again, another pacing miscalculation by the filmmakers. Luckily, this fight fares better than the boxing match because there's actually some design and clarity present in the choreography. It's also styled to feel like an homage to the Way of the Dragon end fight, which is a fun choice. The fight's pretty standard stuff, but it gets the essentials right. The camera isn't wildly shaking, there are some hard, clear exchanges and stunt work, a clear back and forth of who's in control, and a few fun Bruce Lee trademarks. For a second there, I actually find myself enjoying the film, and forget what a drag the rest of it's been. Overall, it's a pretty forgettable film despite the promising choice to tell a more intimate story about Bruce's youth and family. I wish I cared more about the characters and their relationships, but the plotting is too scattered and aimless, and without a discernible character arc at its core for Bruce, there's nothing really to emotionally invest in. It's a shame, really. The film being untethered to Bruce's mythic exploits in the US offered the filmmakers a chance to represent Bruce as more of a real human, as opposed to an icon whose story and identity are mostly informed and tangled with his relationship to Western society, Western discrimination, and Western life. With Dragon, Megan Morris notes the following.
By blurring Lee's overt and distinctive cultural nationalism into a generalized reaction against racism, it transfigures a Hong Kong Chinese hero as flexibly Asian American.
But because Bruce Lee, My Brother is a Chinese production set in Hong Kong and shaped by Chinese filmmakers, there was a unique chance to portray Bruce from an authentic Eastern lens. He wouldn't need to act as a flexibly symbolic Asian American stand-in to project onto. He could just be a more human and individual Chinese person on screen. I'm really not sure to what degree the film succeeds with this, since I'm not Chinese. I'm a second-generation Vietnamese guy living in Australia, but I think it's safe to bet that it's more authentically Chinese than Dragon. So, does this make it a better film than Dragon? No, not in my opinion. The film just doesn't do enough to really warrant its existence. It's narratively hollow, creatively clunky, and overall just too dull. It's just a missed opportunity.
Next!
Film 3, Birth of the Dragon. What do you get when you mix together the worst elements of the previous two films, like the historical inaccuracies, the tedious subplots, and the boring characters, plus some extra bonus low-key racist issues sprinkled throughout? You get this shitty movie released back in 2016, directed by George Nolfi. Based on the posters and trailers, you'd think Bruce Lee was the main character of this movie, right? Sorry, nope, this is Steve McKee, the actual main character.
Why?
They saw no issue with sidelining the central figure of interest and literally inventing a fictitious, bland-as-hell white character to rest the majority of this movie on. They're shortchanging the audience with misleading marketing material, they're kneecapping their own film by replacing their famous historical figure with this super generic lead character no one asked for, and they're perpetuating the exhausting marginalization of Asian characters in Western media. This movie actively dilutes and muddles a uniquely Asian American story by choosing not to center the film on Bruce Lee. Like, come on, it's in the damn title, Birth of the Dragon, it's not Birth of Steve McKee. Further compounding the problem of Bruce's reduced role is the sheer amount of, let's call it creative license, that the filmmakers take with twisting historical facts. Here's a quick summary of the film before I do a deep dive into how much bullshit this film makes up. Wong Jack-man is a Shaolin monk who's come over to America as an act of penance for almost killing his opponent after losing his control in a fight in China. Wong is your stereotypical stoic monk, a cliche Darcy Coover would likely call a trope.
This is another of the model minority style positive stereotypes.
Bruce, meanwhile, is teaching students in San Francisco. Among them is Steve McKee. Steve ends up meeting Wong and becomes enamored by the peaceful and wise monk.
Kung Fu is not just a way of fighting. It is a way of living and thinking.
He's the polar opposite of Bruce Lee.
What does Sifu Lee teach you?
He teaches us to kick ass.
So what are you gonna do when a badass comes at you in an alley?
Kick ass, kick ass, kick ass, kick.
What is this stupid shit? McKee grows torn between the two masters and their differing ideologies, and becomes sort of an errand boy passing messages between them. McKee also meets a Chinese waitress named Xiaolan, and instantly falls for her. He finds out that she works in a restaurant owned by a Chinese triad mobster named Auntie Blossom, who helped smuggle her into the country. Ding ding, that's right, she's an exotic Asian damsel in distress who will be rescued from her predicament thanks to a gallant white savior. Film scholar Celine Shimizu, author of the book The Hypersexuality of Race, says the emergence of films and artwork after US-led wars in Asian countries is when the trope of the hypersexual but docile Asian woman really took hold in America.
The Barbarian and the Geisha, the horrible John Wayne movie, where again, the white man is going to rescue the Japanese woman and take the beautiful Japanese flower of a woman, you know, to be his loving wife, to be his subservient wife.
While not explicitly confirmed as a fetish of McKee's or depicted in a manner that is overtly objectifying, the filmmakers nonetheless failed to examine the interracial aspects of their relationship. McKee's first brief meeting with Zuilan while making a work delivery just doesn't warrant the immediate fixation that he develops for her. The script could have had McKee want to save her without also wanting to romantically pursue her, but nope, he's obsessed. Like, he awkwardly visits her while she's at work to pass her notes, also gives her gifts, and she even sneaks out once to see him on what's basically a secret date. As innocent as the film wants to portray this, McKee has all the power in this relationship. Zuilan is basically enslaved by the triads, has no immediate family or friends in America to help her, and must rely on McKee, who, let's be honest, based on how little he knows about her, is maybe just attracted to the idea of her, the stereotypical expectation of her being gentle, docile, and in need of saving. Robin Zhang distills it well when she notes the following.
While Asian American women are already subject to sexual objectification as women, racial depersonalization involves a further dimension of objectification.
What's this stuff?
Well, that's one way to put it. You can tell this is written by old white men. All the overt Eastern elements are exaggerated to pretty cringy levels.
What's the problem with sharing it with us?
Do you share your atomic bomb secrets
Well, Kung Fu isn't an atomic bomb.
No, it is more powerful. The bomb comes from the death force. Kung Fu comes from Qi, the life force. Life is stronger than death.
Anyway, back to Zuilan's character, or lack thereof. She's primarily used as a damsel in distress, and even a plot device to get the two masters to finally fight. The Triad lady, Auntie Blossom, makes McKee an offer. In exchange for Zuilan's release, Wong has to fight Bruce. Wong reluctantly agrees. I love how McKee goes to excitedly tell Zuilan, but when she brings up the other enslaved women also stuck in the restaurant, he immediately deflates. He didn't even think about them. He just wants to rescue the one chick he can date and screw, not the others. They don't matter. Fast forward to Bruce and Wong facing off, and it's a long-winded, creatively scatterbrained scene. Seriously, they throw every showy, stylistic trick in the filmmaking book to try and make it grander and more exciting than it really is. I'll break it down in detail later, but let's just move on for now. They technically have a draw, I guess, but the filmmakers seem to lean in favor of Wong because of how they have him outthink Bruce, trap Bruce, and show mercy to Bruce. Auntie Blossom isn't happy with the fight's outcome, and doesn't release Zuilan. Wow, what a duplicitous, conniving, and evil thing to do. Well, look at that, we got ourselves a dragon lady trope too. I guess the Asian damsel in distress wasn't enough. So now, Bruce and Wong team up and barge into Auntie Blossom's restaurant, in what is admittedly the only time the film feels a little fun. This is largely because it drops its self-serious and cliched main narrative in favor of something more akin to a schlocky B-grade Bruce exploitation film. Bruce and a monk fighting triad goons in a Chinese restaurant to rescue people? That actually sounds like some dumb fun. Like, the right kind of trash instead of this bland, pretentious crap. By the film's end, McKee's living the yellow fever dream, Bruce has become a better and more humbled fighter thanks to the amazing Shaolin monk, and Wong goes back home to China. The end. Yikes, where do we begin? Let's start with Bruce's character assassination.
And what do you mean you finally met a living legend? You see me every day.
He's made out to be such an asshole here. Before the 10-minute mark, we see him being needlessly snide to his student McKee, who's just trying to thank him and ask some simple questions.
I just want to say thank you for letting me be in the movie.
No problem. You're a natural. You look great getting your ass beat.
How am I doing in class?
You work hard. You're even beginning to develop your own style.
What kind of style?
A bad one. Come, I'll show you.
Then Bruce needlessly embarrasses him in front of some of the other students.
You think you're tough? You think you're street? Come on! Show me what your street is!
Show me what your street is. Jesus, who the hell wrote that line? Bruce is such a brash, annoying, smug jerk here. Actor Philip Ng has the thankless job of embodying this crappy interpretation of Bruce Lee. He's a fit and capable performer, but just doesn't quite strike the right feel for me, despite the attempt at mimicking the accent and mannerisms. Most of the blame falls on the awful script and characterization, though.
Oh, hey, Mac. Oh, hey, Mac.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Shit, even the actor seems to have his own rationale for how much the script fictionalizes. In this interview, note how he carefully and diplomatically excuses the film's liberties.
People have to go in this film knowing that it's not a biopic or it's not a documentary. It's more of a fan fiction or a kung fu fable. I think that's the mindset they have to bring into that.
Alright, well, let me start comparing the fable to the facts. Early in the film, we see Bruce shooting a fight scene outdoors at night, where, again, he's depicted as an arrogant dick.
What was the last ass I kicked?
Roll sound.
It's not about you, dipshit. It's about me.
Oh. The way the filmmakers handle this little scene speaks volumes to their ignorance about Bruce's filmmaking legacy. Say what you want about his films, they're super dated now and I wouldn't be able to sit through them from start to finish, but in context of when they were made and the impact they've left, they were evidence of blossoming talent and care. With each production, Bruce humbly improved his filmmaking craft and diligently sought out to be a more creative filmmaker than his peers, even coming to write, direct, and produce his own work after forming his own production company. He didn't rest on his laurels and pump out whatever the studio execs told him to. He had the pretty ambitious goal of elevating Hong Kong filmmaking to the more professional and polished Western standards.
It is growing and it is getting higher and going toward that standard, that what I would term quality.
After his first two violent revenge action movies catapulted him to Eastern stardom, Bruce started taking more control of his film career with his first directorial effort, The Way of the Dragon. Here he played against type, as a comedic fish-out-of-water country bumpkin. He also ambitiously filmed overseas in Rome, and even sprinkled in a thoughtful moment of pause after the film's karate villain is killed. His incomplete film, The Game of Death, was meant to be a multi-layered allegorical exploration of his martial arts philosophy on adaptation. When he passed away, his creative intent and care were also gone, so it was butchered into a generic hollow action flick. When Hollywood came knocking on his door and signed him on for Enter the Dragon, he flexed his clout and leveraged his star power to include more thoughtful dialogue scenes to accompany the action, and even got them to wisely drop the film's original bland title, Blood and Steel. He stressed and worked so feverishly hard on the American production that he lost 15% of his total body weight and was sleep deprived. This is all evidence of how much he poured himself into his film work and how much he cared about their quality. But again, this film flat out ignores Bruce's commendable artistic integrity and depicts him as an egotistical complainer on set, just filming an action scene with little concern for the stuntmen around him or the quality of the final product. He's just a massive douchebag. Now let's talk about how the film shits on Bruce's martial arts legacy by fabricating almost everything it depicts. Okay, in order to really dig into the film's failings, I'm gonna have to give you a quick abridged history lesson about the real-life fight Bruce had with Wong. Wong Jack Man was a traditional martial artist with Northern Shaolin training. When he arrived in the United States, he challenged Bruce to a fight. Why? Well, Bruce would publicly criticize the effectiveness of traditional martial arts every chance he had. This wound up offending a group of young traditional students. These lads sought out Wong's help and convinced him to teach Bruce a lesson. Wong saw defeating the controversial Bruce as an opportunity to help him achieve his dream of opening his own school, so he agreed. There was no triad restaurant full of Chinese women to free. After a few weeks of negotiating, the lads arrived at Bruce's school after hours during the evening with their champion, Wong. This was the first time Bruce and Wong had met. In the movie, Wong visits Bruce at a demonstration to watch, and Bruce is the one who extends the challenge. Also present were Linda and Bruce's friend, James Lee. The atmosphere was tense. James even had a gun tucked away in case things went sideways. Again, it wasn't in some big concrete warehouse packed with a dozen spectators. Bruce's immediate hostility surprised the challengers. He demanded it be an all-out, no-rules fight. The fight was a frenzied 3-minute mess. In Linda's words, few men had a quicker temper than Bruce, and Wong recalls how it seemed Bruce genuinely wanted to kill him. Wong did a lot of backpedaling and even fled into another room, desperately trying to evade Bruce's flurry of attacks. As Bruce chased him into the other room, Wong managed to catch Bruce off guard with a chop to the neck while secretly wearing a hidden wrist bracelet studded with metal spikes. What a dirty, cheap shot. The strike drew blood, and this sent Bruce into a blind rage. He chased after Wong again, who fell to the ground. Bruce leapt on top of him, wailed some more punches, and made Wong give up.
Do you give up? Do you give up?
Give up.
So in reality, it was like 3 minutes of awkward running around, one cheap shot, and Wong falling over to the ground before giving up. What's the movie version? Well, like I mentioned earlier, the filmmakers wanted this to be a grand and epic battle, so they utilized so many visual and audio techniques to bizarre, distracting, and shallow effect. It really is a haphazardly constructed fight scene that tries too hard. Let's break it down. The frame rate suddenly starts blurring and everything's weird and fuzzy. Why? I have no idea. Was it just a boring bit of choreography they wanted to jazz up? It doesn't seem to be highlighting any notable emotional or narrative shift in the fight. And there's this painfully cringy moment where Wong gracefully falls from like a 3-story drop with ease, because Shaolin monks have magic, apparently.
I didn't know that.
He even goads Bruce to attempt the same leap, and he nervously does. Oh man, I wish. Bruce also sticks the landing and is surprised that he made it.
Now you begin to exceed your limits.
What limits?
Oh god, and did I mention it's super pretentious and self-serious? The music bends over backwards to try and paint this as a larger-than-life mythical duel. You've got choir vocals, artsy violin, cheesy oriental flutes, and some heavy-handed sound design. More weird fantasy crap happens when Bruce and Wong start teleporting around, with the spectators unable to follow their movements. What the hell is this, Dragon Ball Z?
I can't keep up.
Movie, please stop. Dial it down. Stop trying to be so cool with all these random goofy ideas. Oh man, another pointless flashy shot. Please, just end already. Okay, what last trick are you pulling now? Okay, so you're having Bruce mimic Wong's moves to beat him? The anti-traditional rebel is gonna prove the superiority of his modern techniques by using his opponent's traditional techniques. Oh my god. Okay, you get the point. It's a weird mess and tries way too hard. Now let's talk about the more personal consequences of this fight that put Bruce on a new path with his martial arts philosophy and training. Matthew Polly sums up the change thusly. The match with Wong Jack Man proved to be an epiphany for Bruce. It was the turning point that led him to abandon his traditional style of Kung Fu. For years, he had preached the individual was more important than the style. After his ugly win, he finally accepted this truth for himself. Modifying a few techniques was insufficient. He needed to start from scratch and formulate his own personal brand of martial arts. For those paying attention during the previous Dragon segment, this would eventually become Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist.
What is this thing you do?
In Cantonese, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist.
Intercepting fist, huh?
Or foot. Come on, touch me. Any way you can. To reach me, you must move to me. Your attack offers me an opportunity to intercept you. In this case, I'm using my longest weapon, my sidekick, against the nearest target, your kneecap. This can be compared to your left jab in boxing, except it's much more damaging.
I see.
As Bruce so eloquently explained, what differentiated Jeet Kune Do from other styles at the time was its emphasis on intercepting your opponent. He discarded the useless ornamental flair of showy traditional styles, and as a result, techniques were stripped down to their most efficient and direct application. Forget about how the film presents Bruce as a crap teacher instructing his students on how to kick ass. In his actual LA school, he thoughtfully trained each student differently in ways that best suited their personalities and skill level. He even hand-typed detailed feedback for each of them on their progress. By all accounts, he was an attentive and inspiring teacher. The school was also highly unorthodox and modern. There were no uniforms, no belts, no bowing, no ranks. His classes also incorporated music, hard sparring with protective gear, heavy focus on conditioning and cardiovascular stamina, studying boxing footage, and wasted no time on rigid katas, unrealistic self-defense techniques, and the non-contact point sparring popular at the time, which he compared to swimming on dry land. And with his overall philosophy to adopt techniques from all styles, he really was ahead of his time. I think most Bruce Lee fans stop there and fawn over how he created his modern, practical style. Even the movie Dragon stops there. But I feel this misses a deeper and more thoughtful level to Bruce's evolution as a martial artist. What I admired most can be considered the final stage in his development, before his untimely death. Let me break it down in terms of stages, 3 stages specifically. Stage 1. Bruce started off as a devout Wing Chun traditionalist. Sure, he tweaked things here and there, but he was a big advocate of the style and deemed it the most superior system of self-defense. He was totally indoctrinated, and it stemmed from immaturity, national pride, and ignorance.
What is the most powerful or the best form?
In my opinion, I think Kung Fu is pretty good.
Stage 2. Bruce realizes Wing Chun doesn't work in the boxing ring, and that despite his relentless practice, beating Wong took far too long and left him winded and dejected. Thus, he steamrolls ahead with laser focus on only practical techniques pulled from various styles, incorporates much more cardiovascular conditioning and weight training, and discards tradition. He's become the rebellious pioneer Jeet Kune Do. Stage 3. Bruce hurts his back, and while recovering in bed for months, reads and researches. He's particularly taken with the writings of Indian philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti. Bruce realizes the folly in his pursuit of creating an ultimate martial arts style. There's no such thing. What matters is the individual and their capacity to continually evolve, learn, and adapt. In order to help guide his students, and himself for that matter, towards their own personal liberation from styles, Bruce grew to view Jeet Kune Do as a metaphorical boat to get one across the river, and once across, is to be discarded and not be carried on one's back. This gradual maturity and radical change in personal philosophy was really cool and inspiring to me in my teens. I know it's going to sound hyperbolic, but in the realm of martial arts, he was transcendent, man. No one had thought as deeply as he did about martial arts or went on the same introspective journey he did. His obsessive probing, questioning, and pushing of the art led him to the genuine and sincere belief that it could be a tool to liberate and express oneself.
To me, ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself.
It's why he's so celebrated. He was equal parts punkish rebel and introspective monk. He had the brain and brawn. That dichotomy will always be fascinating and unique, except for when that dichotomy is imbalanced like it is in this crap movie. I hope you can see just how badly the filmmakers failed at translating and adapting that rich, transformative journey on screen, and how they gave too much undeserved credit and reverence to Wong. Remember, the real-life Wong secretly wore weapons to have an advantage against Bruce, and later lied to the tabloids about the outcome of the fight to save face. He was a flawed human, not the super noble, dignified monk depicted in the movie. The fact that the filmmakers made Wong the external catalyst for Bruce's transformation, instead of it being something Bruce internally came to realize himself, is why the film is intrinsically flawed. It expects us to accept that an old-school traditional Shaolin monk from China is the reason Bruce Lee evolved as a martial artist and teacher. The script makes Wong so wise that he actually foresaw Bruce's amazing potential to promote Kung Fu to the world.
He is the future. He will bring Kung Fu to the world. I can see that now. But what sort of Kung Fu will he bring to the world? An angry thing? A hurtful thing? A thing to be bought and sold? Unless he is willing to be reborn.
So then Wong uses their fight to indirectly teach Bruce humility and to magically push Bruce's capabilities and to incite Bruce to create his own style. The film not only took away Bruce's screen time and his role as the protagonist, they eroded his likable charisma. They stripped him of his artistic integrity and also his personal agency.
Wong showed me I reached a limit of my style. He made me realize I had to create a whole new style.
You know what? Screw the stupid, boring, pretentious, tone-deaf, stereotype-reinforcing, whitewashed waste of 2 hours.
Get ready for the next battle.
Film 4 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. If you haven't heard, the star-studded film made headlines for its brief but memorable inclusion of Bruce Lee in one standout scene where the famous martial arts star has a little fight scene with Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Booth. Adding fuel to the fire was how Tarantino stubbornly defended the controversial and unfavorable portrayal as being grounded in facts.
Bruce Lee was kind of an arrogant guy. I didn't just make a lot of that up. I heard him say things like that to that effect. And even the thing, people are like, well, he never said he could beat up Muhammad Ali. Yeah, he did, all right? Not only did he say that, his wife, Linda Lee, said that. And the first biography I ever read was Linda Lee's Bruce Lee, the Man Only I Knew. And she absolutely said it.
Wrong. Linda was quoting a TV critic. Even the most scathing critics admitted that Bruce's Kung Fu was sensational. One critic wrote, those who watched him would bet on Lee to render Cassius Clay senseless if they were put in a room and told that anything goes. Well, looks like Tarantino's put his foot in his mouth, but then again, he'd probably enjoy that shit. Here's a quick summary of the scene. Cliff is doing some housework and starts reminiscing, so the Bruce Lee scene is technically a subjective flashback to 1966. Some viewers have noted subtle clues as to why the scene is a product of Cliff's unreliable memory, and that we shouldn't trust what we see. Keep that interesting note in mind, I'll get back to it later, but right now let's just recap the scene. We're on the back lot of a TV show, The Green Hornet, that Bruce Lee starred in as Kato. During a break, Bruce is waxing lyrical to the crew about his frustrations with how restrictive martial arts tournaments are in comparison to the full contact exchanges in boxing. Also present and listening with some quiet amusement is Brad Pitt's character, Cliff Booth, a middle-aged stuntman and ex-beret. Tarantino's version of Bruce is someone seemingly in love with his own voice.
In martial arts tournaments, they won't let you fight like that. It's very frustrating. You stand in front of a guy, you just want to let him have it. But you can't. So you gotta do this play-acting, patty cake version.
Come on, we know Bruce never competed in tournaments. He thought they weren't close enough approximations of real fighting.
Cassius Clay, Sonny Liston, Joe Louis, the colored boxer, not that white kickboxing asshole.
Wait, what? Joe got private lessons from Bruce in real life, and in his own words, Bruce had actually in a great way improved his fighting style and helped accelerate his career. Joe praised Bruce as a true master and master teacher, and that his main quality was his charm. He could charm anybody. Where the hell's that charm here?
But in martial arts tournaments, I do to win what they do to win. I unleash all my power. I kill people.
What the fuck?
Cliff finally breaks his amused silence when Bruce declares that he would cripple Muhammad Ali if they had ever fought.
So what do you think is so funny?
You're a little man with a big mouth and a big chip, and I think you should be embarrassed to suggest you be anything more than a stain on the seat of Cassius Clay's trunks.
A big chip on his shoulder? Are you fucking kidding, Tarantino? Are you calling the racial prejudice Bruce faced on the daily just a chip on his shoulder? Like he was just needlessly whinging? So, Bruce being severely underpaid compared to his white co-stars wasn't an issue? And I guess Bruce having to make self-deprecating stereotypical Asian jokes about himself to win white people's favor wasn't a problem either, hey? Or having his aspirations rudely belittled? And how about being interrupted during interviews when trying to speak out about Hollywood's racial stereotyping?
Yeah, man. I mean, they're trying to get me to do too many things that are really for the sake of being exotic. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Oh, sure.
So it's really, I mean, it's
when you live in both worlds, it brings its problems as well as its advantages, and you've got both.
You're a little man with a big mouth and a big chip.
Tarantino, man, you're a rich, celebrated white male film director with a foot fetish. Don't fucking demean Bruce's fight against racism. And with that Ali remark, I call bullshit. Bruce reportedly had great respect for Ali and would watch and study his fights at home. According to one of Bruce's closest friends, Dan Inosanto, Bruce worshipped the ground Muhammad Ali walked on and would never have said anything derogatory about him. Director Robert Klaus even claims that Bruce once jokingly remarked in private that Ali would have beaten him in an actual fight. Anyway, Bruce and Cliff end up having a friendly little contest, no hitting each other in the face, best 2 out of 3. Round 1 goes to Bruce, who lands his signature flying sidekick. Round 2 goes to Cliff, who effortlessly tosses Bruce into the side of a car. Round 3 is a short little exchange that's quickly interrupted. No one wins, but it sure as hell doesn't feel like Bruce had the advantage at any point. Shit, they even make sure to squeeze in one final joke at Bruce's expense after the fight.
Was beating the shit out of Bruce!
What? Let me just say, nobody beat the shit out of Bruce. It was a friendly contest. He barely touched me.
I think that dent in the car says something different.
Alright, before we dive into why this scene was problematic, let's sing some praises. Mike Moh gives a pretty solid performance here. He basically nails Bruce's unique voice and mannerisms. Despite basically being written as a cringy and obnoxious parody, I found Mike Moh genuinely fun to watch, and I don't think he should cop any blame for how Tarantino chose to write Bruce. Those creative decisions were out of his control. Another element I liked is the interesting idea that this scene is unreliable. Remember that interpretation I mentioned earlier? That this whole fight was made up in Cliff's head? The clues are there. There's a billboard ad for a film that shouldn't exist yet in that year, and crew members who magically disappear. It's a pretty creative and subtle way to infuse a little more ambiguity and complexity to Cliff's character. Vox writer Emily Vanderwerf sums it up nicely when she states that if the scene is just Cliff's imagination, suddenly it's not a scene about Cliff being able to best Lee, but one about his own self-deception regarding the ways his career has grounded itself on the shoals of changing tastes in Hollywood. So Bruce Lee needs to be cockier and a bigger jerk than he would have been in real life, because he needs to stand in for all that Cliff finds concerning about the Hollywood of 1969 in his own career trajectory. While it's a fun reading, it doesn't absolve Tarantino or negate people's fair criticisms, because ultimately, in order to infuse Cliff with more depth and dimension, Bruce Lee had to be stripped of his depth and dimension.
Fair enough.
Viewers are right to criticize this Bruce as being uncharacteristically arrogant, and worse still, inept. It's an unflattering and cartoony caricature, further complicated by the fact that it puts the sole minority Asian character at the mercy of a cool and hyper-competent white leading man. He's both physically and verbally bested.
But my hands are registered as lethal weapons. We get into a fight, I accidentally kill you. I go to jail.
Anybody accidentally kills anybody in a fight, they go to jail. It's called manslaughter.
It's a portrayal that paints him as an egotistical phony, someone full of hot air who can't back up their own words and therefore is ultimately a joke. Initially, Tarantino even wrote Bruce flat out losing the third round. One of the film's stunt coordinators, Robert Alonzo, revealed that in Tarantino's original script, the fight had Cliff emerging as a more clear-cut winner, beating Bruce in the third round, and adds that this was a concern for some of the crew, including Brad Pitt. Mike Moh also had reservations, admitting to being very conflicted about Tarantino's earlier draft. Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee, has also been vocal about her disappointment with Tarantino's portrayal of her late father.
You know, I understand what he was trying to do around the character of Cliff Booth in the film, but, you know, he could have handled it in a way that was respectful of my father, as well as, you know, served his story purposes.
The script treatment of my father as this arrogant, egotistical punching bag was really disheartening, and I feel unnecessary. They didn't need to treat him in the way that white Hollywood did when he was alive.
That's pretty spot on. Author Matthew Polly, who penned the biography Bruce Lee: A Life, that exhaustively chronicles Bruce's life in great detail, seems to agree, adding that, given how sympathetic Tarantino's portrayal of Steve McQueen, Jay Sebring, and Sharon Tate is, I'm surprised he didn't afford the same courtesy to Lee, the only non-white character in the film. He could have achieved the same effect using Bruce to make Brad Pitt's character look tough without the mockery.
His kung fu becomes a joke, and his philosophizing becomes a fortune cookie. And the sounds that he makes as he does kung fu are literally made fun of by Cliff.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who starred with Bruce Lee in the 1978 film The Game of Death, also found the scene disappointing and labelled it a lapse of cultural awareness on Tarantino's part. Kareem found the execution sloppy and somewhat racist. At that same press conference, Tarantino admitted to having a little bit of fun at Lee's expense, and that the scene had a touch of parody to it.
Then why are you so apprehensive?
If he had just stopped there and admitted that his version of Bruce was a fun embellishment and that he was skewing the truth, I think a lot less people would be annoyed. But instead, he chose to stubbornly waffle on about how the depiction was accurate and based on fact. That's where he screwed up. because his defensive claims can be easily proven wrong, and rather than owning up to and acknowledging the fair criticism, he's not willing to admit to any fault. This Bruce Lee is just another unfortunate reminder of the cultural insensitivity and lack of Asian representation rampant in Hollywood. Okay, conclusion time. Holy shit, I've been talking for an hour. Alright, let's wrap it up. I am so sorry.
Please try to find a way to forgive me.
While each film shares its own unique issues and faults, one of them does stand out from the rest. This Outlier is a fairly enjoyable film in its own right, and a relatively layered and respectful portrayal of Bruce Lee. It's not Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's barely in that one, and he's mocked to the core. Birth of the Dragon also paints Bruce as a similarly arrogant asshole, but at least he's a capable blowhard compared to Tarantino's inept blowhard. Bruce Lee, My Brother, was so bland and inoffensive that it's only memorable to me as being just a wasted opportunity. And this leaves us with Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, an all-round pretty conventionally told biopic, but when compared to the other three films, does a much more satisfying and competent job of exploring Bruce's legacy as a rising star, a rebellious martial artist, a partner, and most importantly, leaned into exploring his experiences being an Asian American facing systemic racism in Hollywood and society. With mainstream films today scarcely willing to examine racial identity and discrimination from an Asian lens, it's disappointing how this almost 30-year-old movie is still maybe one of the better examples of a mainstream Hollywood production even making that effort. The irony, of course, is that the filmmakers were not Asian Americans themselves. I hope one day another attempt is made to adapt Bruce's story to the big screen, or maybe even in a mini-series format. That'd be really cool. And I hope that talented Asian filmmakers are placed in key roles to infuse the production with an authentic and sincere Asian American voice. Bruce's ambitious creative pursuits, his self-confidence and motivation, and his steadfast pride in being Asian are the things that now really resonate with me. They're such admirable and inspiring qualities in a person, and things I imagine a lot of people like myself have struggled with. Growing up through phases of wanting to behave and appear more white, actively trying to repress our Asian heritage, being insecure and unsure about our ability and talents, and just settling for the scraps of Asian representation in Western media. Bruce didn't stand for any of that.
How many times in film is a Chinese required? It is required. It is always branded as the typical, so I say, hell with it.
It's been 50 years now, and I, for one, think we're well overdue for a richer diversity of filmmaking voices to be the standard. No more racist stereotypes, no more desexualized Asian men, no more hypersexualized Asian women, no more whitewashing, and no more fucking yellowface. We need to widen the scope and range of stories we can be protagonists in. I think if aspiring Asian artists can channel that same sort of passionate motivation and fierce rejection of the status quo like Bruce Lee did, then we could be well on our way to winning the fight for better representation.
Are you going to stay in Hong Kong and be famous? Or are you going to go to the United States and be famous? Or are you going to try and eat your cake and have it too?
I am going to do both because, you see, I have already made up my mind that in the United States, I think something about the Oriental, the true Oriental should be shown.
Hollywood sure as heck hasn't.
You better believe it, man.
You still think of yourself Chinese, or do you ever think of yourself as North American?
You know what I want to think of myself? As a human being. Because, I don't want to sound like, as Confucius say, but under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happened, man, that people are different.
Alright, if you enjoyed the video and my long geeky rambling, please consider subscribing for more.
No thanks.
Well, that's all from me. Thanks for watching. I'm Dave, and I talk too much.